Okay, I think we might as well get started. It's getting to be 20 after, and you're all eager students. My name's Dave St. George, and I am the Executive Director of SAFE. Thank you all for coming. How many people traveled from where it's cold? Look at that. Why wouldn't I go to Florida? Yeah, me too. I was in Minnesota, minus 65 wind chill last week. So, yeah, it's great to be down here. And the topic is the Young Cfi. How many people run schools? Okay, great. Let's see if this is what it's supposed to. I guess I got to plug it in. Operational, correct? Where's my co-pilot? See, this is why I'm captain. Co-pilot. Can't do anything all by myself. So there he is. This is sort of the internet meme. That's just the guy that just marched out of the academy. Do you hire these people, Jill, right out of the academy?
Some yes,
yeah.
Some no.
And the point is they're not really prepared to do the job. They met the standard. The standard is 70%, right? Pass rate. Everyone know Mike Shiflett from CFI Boot Camp, Power Hour on Saturdays? They know the 15 things. They studied hard. They walk out of the academy. They've only flown 172s, and now they're your raw material. And if you hire them, they are the face of your business. This is who they see when they think of Rochester Air Center or whatever your school is. They are totally your representative. And in 1,500 hours, bye-bye, right? And to put a face on this, just so you know what the statistics are, there's 122,000 CFIs in the country right now. Anyone have a guess on how many of those are active? Active?
5%.
5?
5%.
Yep.
2.
2? Well, at least you're in the right market. It's actually 8% have signed off an 8710 or a student for a certificate in the last year. And I publish that in a blog. We put Safe Blog every Saturday, and people say, well, I'm active. I do IPCs, BFRs, and all this. But the government considers active to be signed off for a certificate. And we know also that 12,000 new CFIs come onto the registry. Is that about right, Lee? 12%, 12,000 every year. So what's going on is continuously there's this churn, and these people are actually what is giving the majority of the instruction in the United States. This is what is giving all of the instruction. How many of you are CFIs? And how many, probably all of you have been CFIs for more than 5 years, right? Experience. That's like a very thin veneer. I don't know if you saw Eric Crump's talk virtually last year on the data. And that's where I got alerted to this. It's like, there's very few of us that teach year after year after year. And when you become a DPE, you don't teach that much anymore. So a lot of those people move out of the system. And these are the people who are teaching. And they're gone. And then you get this kind of thing, right? And I would see if Roger was here. Okay? That, and I was struggling. What am I going to say at migration that's different? But this is not the way to regard the new CFI, in my opinion. It's very easy, especially how many DPEs in a room? There's probably a couple. I know Doug. Okay. But you can get very cynical and sarcastic when you see the product that comes to you, because people are aiming at that 70% ACS standard, just barely past the test. And we're going to get into that, but somebody that's pretty miserable as a pilot, if they make the standard, and Doug will testify to this, what we call grays, it's like we're walking this line and you just don't know which side of the line the body's going to fall on. They're just absolutely miserable, but if they get everything just about right, our duty is to, sign the paper and give them a certificate. But some of my best CFIs were these young people. They're full of excitement. They've got great knowledge. And this kid, right out of the box, was wonderful. It doesn't always happen. In fact, it very seldom happens. But if you can't see, I have another picture. He's actually on his knees. I said, I want to get a picture of this student you just took out for a discovery flight, young guy. He gets on his knees so they're at the same height. I mean, he's just a natural at it. But that's not typical. So what I argue is we should take this raw material, and the problem is not, what's the problem? The problem is not that they're not educated and they don't know what they're doing. In Canada, they actually would not be an initial CFI. They'd be a class 4. In Canada, when you get your initial CFI, you can't teach one-on-one. You have to be supervised by a class 1 or 2 flight instructor. You're a student teacher. In this country, you get that certificate, you're out there in the wild teaching. And say you're in Iowa with nobody watching and you have a 152. You're totally responsible for that. And this could be a really bad thing if you're in a situation like a lot of you would have a school. You probably do some level of training of this new person. Does anybody do that? Okay. How extensive is your program in green? How many hours do you have to give them so you feel that they're sort of usable?
Not so many hours, but how they are dealing with the technical and the personality piece of it. You know, you might say several students more the measure than number of hours. You know,
right. And like this guy, he was a natural out of the box. He was personable. A lot of millennials are used to dealing with, we were just talking about this, she's becoming reinstating your CFI, right? Okay, probably been a mom, have, experience in life, talk to people, you know how to relate and compassion. That's not always, these people, it's often their first job. So they're learning a job, they're learning how to relate to people, and there's also the background of, they have a whole stress of being in a situation they're not familiar with. But what I do is, does anyone know what that is? That's a champ on skis. You know what happens when you take a 172 Academy graduate from Phoenix and you put them in that? Okay? And so what is this? This is a tool. And this immediately convinces them that they're not a finished product. I don't have to kick them across the stage like Roger, but I have to tell them, I have to make the awareness that I'm not a finished product. And my argument, I have 7 of these points to make. So point 1 is, what we really have to do is get these people into the world of general aviation and show them some diverse experience and convince them. It will become very apparent when they get in there. Where's the G1000? Okay. Where's the gas gauge? Where's anything that I know?
It's got a glass cockpit all the way around it.
Yes, it does. What a wonderful tool. The key thing is, has anyone taken a new CFI out of the academy and put them in one of these planes? Anybody have a tail wheel? Yeah. Fun to watch them turn, right? Yeah. Stick goes left, nose goes right. And this is Rich Stoll's big argument. People don't know how to turn planes. They don't use the feet. Later on, we're going to talk about Mike Mccurdy, and he gets them into Redbird. He actually trains them into Redbird. And if they put 2 hands on the yoke, because as soon as they put 2 hands on the yoke, you're driving. Yeah, they're driving. They're bringing up all of those habit patterns we all have. How do we make it go left? We do this. How do we make it right? We do this. And that driving instinct, I can tell you as an examiner, I've been an examiner quite a few years. But, they apply power on the center line. Plane goes left. Yoke goes right. Plane still goes left. And if you're a CFI, if you see 2 hands up on the yoke, I'd highly encourage that you correct that problem immediately. So what we want to make these new CFIs into is really learners. We want to make them passionate learners because they think they're a finished product, right? I worked so hard, I got the CFI certificate. I'm a god. Does everyone remember when you got your CFI? Right? Wasn't that a great day? And you thought you knew everything? And then you give it a little time and you sort of like, oh. And you move along and you go, my God, what I didn't know at that time when I thought I was, And that's the wake-up call. This is one of my FOs in the left seat. And he was absolutely convinced that you couldn't fly IFR without an autopilot. It wasn't legal. It was not legal. The other thing he was, let's see what else it was. That was just a wake-up call. We're going into Charleston, I think it was, and he's like, I've never landed in the rain before. I'm like, Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Anyway, a little bit of background on SAFE, just because, that's what I do. We are really kind of linked with Redbird. And it was Doug Stewart here in 2009 or something that started a program with Redbirds in scenario-based training before it was well known. And he started something called the Pilot Proficiency Project. And it got so exciting, and everyone was onto it, that Flying Magazine actually said that SAFE had a Redbird. It's like, no, we didn't make the Redbird. We were just sort of born at the same time. That is now this huge center at Oshkosh, which I think is going to go brick and mortar, right?
Yes, sir.
They're building a building.
Yeah,
so
I think it's almost done.
It's almost done. Wow. Okay. So, the focus is year-round training. And Billy Winburn's here, and he's going to talk about remote training. SAFE, a lot of you guys got beat up in COVID, right? Flight schools couldn't fly. SAFE did very well. Online places did very well. And this is a poll, just surprised me. Suddenly we're number one. And I'm going to take you way back to when I started flying. I only put a 2-line bio because I really didn't want to embarrass the other speakers. Okay, my background. No, just kidding. This is 1969, 70. Everyone was excited about flying. I don't know if you looked at the recent Redbird poll, where 80% of people say they'd never get in a plane and learn to fly. No one's excited about flying. We've done a really bad job marketing flying. And Jamie Beckett's in the back. He's one of the AOPA representatives. He beats the drum every day, every month, trying to change this. But this kind of thing, it's expensive. When I learned to fly, when did you learn, Jill? Way back?
I'm not that old.
I learned 50 years ago. $1,999. Piper Blue Skies, guaranteed, okay? That sounds really cheap, and everyone goes, oh, back in the day, it was really cheap. And we sell that myth, right? It's cheap, it's quick, it's easy, it's none of the above, be honest. But if you do the deflationary index, that is now going to be $15,300, which isn't too bad, current dollars. But the point of this thing is that I didn't do anything exciting in aviation myself. I didn't fly supersonic. I didn't land a space shuttle. I just got into PA-28 and drove it. So my bio is all about this. That's what I did. I did flight training. That's how you get like 46,000 landings. Right? Most of them at the same airport. But I did become a pilot examiner a pretty long time ago. And that's Ron Bragg from the FAA. Oh, yeah. We were just talking about this. You know Ron Bragg? Yeah. But he was great.
Yes.
But you think suddenly, okay, I'm a DPE, I have some kind of power, right? In our market, it's the DPE. But all they do are cash the checks, right? All we do is we have an hour and a half, 2 hours to say yes or no. We cannot handle the controls. We cannot demonstrate. That's the quickest way to lose your DPE. We just adjudicate the FAA standard. You have no power at all. Mostly, I don't know if the analogy's been made to you, it's a terrible thing when somebody fails a test. Somebody said it's like watching an animal die. Somebody with all their hopes and dreams, and so you get kind of cynical and sardonic. That's how that Marty McFly thing, I forgive Roger. But it happens. People really have dreams, and we want them to succeed as DPEs. But we don't have a lot of power. And this was the first time I realized that. Somebody walked in with this, and if you don't know what that is, it's an FAA test score, and it's a 70%, and it's an advanced ground instructor. And as a DPE, somebody walks in with that, all I have to do is identify them as who they are, and I issue a certificate. And the next day, that guy's teaching ground school at the college across the street. And he doesn't know a third of what he should know. Look at all the things he got wrong. But that's how the FAA process works. And you have to understand that right at the beginning is it's a 70%. It means somebody's passing. If you have two people like this and they both got certificates, you can't tell which one is really great And you can open that door if you want to keep it a little chillier in here. I don't want everyone to bottle up. But and there's nothing when somebody's deficient on a maneuver, unless they fail, there's nothing that's going to retrain them. There's nothing that's going to retrain them. So the fact that people really focus on that ACS as a training manual is the huge disservice. We just published a blog about like 12 different things that pilots should absolutely know that aren't in the ACS. Fueling an airplane at a robot there. Self-serve, thank you. Brain fade. They're only going to go. They're a new pilot. You're only going 4 hours away. That's it. You're done. That's as big a pilot as you are. But you can't tell the difference. It's like the guy that's at the bottom of the medical school, right? Still doctor. You just don't want him as your doctor. One of these could be CFIs. Maybe you don't want them as your CFI, right? How do you know? So if you make a CFI into a passionate learner, they're going to share that knowledge. They're going to really share that knowledge. And that's point one. Point two is that testing is a 70% standard for the FAA, if you're taking notes. Testing is a standard. This is my ultimate example, though, is crosswinds. How many accidents happen with crosswinds? As a DPE, how many people test on a 10-knot crosswind day? You're not going to see it. I only had one, and he had been on ATP, and they took it away. And he said, "No, it's gusting to 20. We're good." He had 20,000 hours. We're good. The guy from JetSmart at Rochester, they pulled his certificate.
That's an example, just to interject. Another example, after you get your license, get them on crosswind days.
Yeah.
Or you continue after the ticket. So.
Yeah, but why does that not happen? Because the CFI who's going to train him never flew in a crosswind. He's not comfortable, right? He or she. And, that whole game, and we all know the early CFI, way too much on the yokes, right? They're terrified. They don't want to lose their certificate. They got to build their hours. They want to go to the airline, right? So they're on the yoke, they're on the mic. The student's learning nothing, right? So anyway, SAFE is really pushing for 10 crosswind landings to be logged before certification, just as a benchmark. Because 60% of accidents happen, and it's only 5% of piloting time. If people are really serious about safety and you want to make a difference, fix that. That is so basic. And this is what we see, though. This is exactly what we see. And when I saw this, I go, wait a minute, cross-country solo. Mike Shiflett, our expert.
What I do?
Cross-country solo time. What are we supposed to have? But it's a 141 school.
Oh.
So they only do one triangular course, and, we test. So Roger wrote a great book. Roger Sharp wrote a book, and I think it's called, does anyone have this, 30 Ways to Fail Your Flight Test?
Oh.
Yeah, pretty funny book, but it's an excellent book in terms of, what I see from my side. 30 Ways to Fail Your Flight Test. I think it's a pretty self-produced book. It's not published by ASA or anything. What I did was I wrote an app, and this is free. It's on the Apple Store. This is what DPEs do on cloudy days. I'm not a software developer, but I chunked my way through it. And if you just search for this, you'll find it. And it's got everything. It's got endorsements, it's got experience, it's got the test codes in there. And now I even put something called Check Ride Ready for applicants. So anyway, after a while of dealing with this situation where you say, okay, they ought to do this, they ought to make a change. And this is why I got involved with SAFE. And this was probably where I got on board big time, right? Atlanta, we had a symposium. And you'll see a gentleman sitting in back here. There he is. You didn't know Doug Stewart could put a tie on, did you? That's in front of the NTSB. And a very serious Rich Stoll testifying, And, it was the flight instruction system. Flight training is broken. And that was our conjecture. And about 200 people showed up in Atlanta. All the alphabets showed up. And this guy showed up and talked. And the real secret behind all of this was this person, Susan Parson. And God help us if Susan ever retires, because she's been probably one of the major people that gets change made in the government. And she's just that quiet, behind-the-scenes person who can talk to everyone. She wrote the FAA administrator speech. So, but anyway, we did get the ACS. But the ACS is everyone say it together, a testing standard. Minimum. Thank you. And so in your school, I mean, how do you get people to teach beyond that? Can you afford to teach beyond that? I was talking to Bob Hepchest. He was standing here. He's got 5 schools in D.C. He says, we're with Liberty University. We can't afford to, get into fantasy flight training. How can you afford to give extra hours to make that happen? Anybody have a strategy on that? Yeah.
So I'm one of Bob Hepp's assistant chiefs of
I see
locations.
that.
Yeah.
Good for you.
It's usually the progress checks is usually what sort of does it.
Yeah.
That sort of sets the standards, and most of the ratings have about 4 of them.
Yeah.
So say we need to work on this a little more. And it's not impossible to do stuff above and beyond, but it's really with the instructors.
But you're limited to that pretty standard curriculum.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I was talking to one of my instructors who's here, and he apologized for not coming to my talk. But, the key thing in the military, everyone says, the military does it. But you got to remember, every step they take up, one guy advances, 2 guys drop out. One guy advances, 2 guys drop out. It's a very, attrition is a big thing. And in private aviation, we don't say that so long as the checks keep clearing, right? What's everybody's dropout rate? Do you know what your dropout rate is at the school? Is it the standard 80% dropout rate that we see? Jamie wrote the best article on this, and it's in the, I put it in the show notes. I wish it would show up on the app, but it's called I Quit. Yeah. What's that?
Ours was under 20%.
Wow. And where are you?
The last couple I was in the CEO is in Merritt Island.
Merritt Island, down here.
2 flight room.
Yep.
Alabama, South Africa, a little bit. But the reason we were different, most of our students were airline bound or contract work.
Right.
And 80 to 85% mean the process. And the other thing we looked at was they're not there just for our private. They want their instrument rating and do cross-country training. And we focus on special curriculum that give you more time during the cross-country phase to get access to how to plane it, self-pump it, how to deal with crossing and landings, what happens if this happens. So we actually I wrote a specialized curriculum, and in that we allow students to have more at it, not at the private level, because for foreign students it's really hard to teach them basics to get them to solo, and the prop record would be really high. But over the whole course, it was called 110-hour program. It was instrument commercial consulting.
Say it again. 110 hours.
Instrument commercial consulting.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're taking a private pilot.
Yes, he's a private pilot.
And do you qualify the private pilot on the inbound to make sure they have the skills?
Say it again.
When you accept a private pilot into that program, do you make sure they have the basic skills?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The chief or one of the chiefs of the forces would have a private person to make sure that they were standing before they enroll.
That's great. That's a great success rate.
We used Redbird. We had 5 Redbirds to teach students first in the Redbird.
Yep.
And then you go do.
Okay.
Which also shortened the amount of time that it actually took to get the maneuvers down.
That's 0.5 on the list.
And the transfer skill was so good because we made sure they were identical.
Yeah.
They were in Cessna G1000, that's what was up on the screen.
Right.
And that was the flexibility of the Redbird. I had the first Redbird I had for 15, then I had 43, 59, and so on and so forth.
Good for you.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, what really demonstrated this to us was we got a contract to train national air traffic controllers from Nigeria. They were all expert aircraft traffic controllers, but the pilots of the air traffic controllers were having issues communicating because they didn't really know how to open and stuff.
Sure.
In our first group, we had 10 of them. I don't want to take too much of your time.
No.
10 of them and no sim time, and we integrated later on. And once we started to integrate it, because we were like, when the thing came in, we said, how many people really want to get a pilot license? Because the government paid for it.
Right.
How many people just want to solo? And in the first group, it was 1 or 2 events. Then I go out to San Marcos and Roger Sharp. I'll talk about these crazy things that I think we introduced to the next group. And we did, instead of asking up front, we did their first 10 hours in the Redbird. And then we asked that question. And 80% of them said, I want a product. And they can 80% of them did get work.
And this is going to be later.
And the real reason the benefit is because the skill is so high, so you can use that as a tool and not as a toy.
Right. No, and this it's the guy that I know that did that was Mike Mccurdy down in Charleston. And if you know the IFR 6 program, but he puts them directly into Redbird first. You train it in the Redbird, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. You don't want to scare somebody. You want to give them a sense of mastery early on, so they start to feel good about themselves. In other words, they didn't get into flying to be frustrated and to be yelled at, and they got into flying to challenge and adventure. And these are people who are recreationally minded, and they're people that want to feel good about themselves. They don't want to be demeaned. And you see a lot of these flight schools, unfortunately, it's kind of a suffering thing, and it shouldn't be. What's that? Chart. You got to hit chart.
Yeah, but the other thing is, just to go back and then I'll let you go forward, is those tests don't mean much because you get people that get to 70%, and you put them into real action, and they're sometimes better than the person who both memorizes the answer to the test. And that's the point I was referring to.
You mean the knowledge test?
The knowledge test.
The knowledge test. I'd agree with you there.
You teach a monkey how to pass the test, they learn knowledge. The aviation just learn the topics and stuff like that exam, but that doesn't necessarily transfer the skills up.
Well, and believe me, DPEs know this. We see a 99 on all the tests. We go, okay, yeah. But somebody that struggled a little and got in the 80s, but I've been encouraging DPEs, if it doesn't get in the 80s, charge $100 more. Incentivize this. I asked my POI if it was legal, and he said you can charge whatever you want. So, but what I see on Facebook, is like I got a 95, and three trolls write in and say, dude, you wasted your effort. All you need is a 70. Come on, dude. But, in other words, we really have to encourage professionalism and excellence because the FAA standard is the minimum. And if we keep focusing on that as the goal, they're going to miss the mark because, 100 feet up or down, okay, 150, 200, you're done. It's sort of like target shooting. You got to be in that because when you're nervous, you're not going to be hitting the target. And so you want to overtrain people, and you want to give them the extras. The problem with this, is that the CFI is tested with practical test standards still. We never got the ACS for flight instructor done. So flight instructors who are teaching everyone are not trained in risk management. So that's what you're going to be, your renewal will be based on that. Doug Stewart behind you can do that
One
test for
quick
you.
question.
Yes.
If and when we ever do get that ACS,
Right.
I can do CFI initials. There's a big change in the prelude, I'll call it, to each test.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that the CFI not only can teach it, demonstrate knowledge, teach, but actually demonstrate full understanding of the topic.
Yeah.
And it's not in the PTS now. If we ever get the ACS, it'll be a lot more good.
And Doug does the initial CFIs tests. He travels even to do those. Incidentally, the initial CFI currently the pass rate is almost the same as private pilot. It's gotten up in the 70s.
David, to add to that, down in Wayman, what we started doing, we started hiring some
Speak up so everyone.
We started hiring some new CFIs this year with the pandemic kind of dying down. We needed some CFIs. So one of the things we try to do was, integrate the simulator and stuff. And the biggest thing I always tell them is, I know they can all fly because, like they said, you all have a certificate in your back pocket. I can't take it away from you, but can you teach? And we find out that when they go, we give them about a week worth of ground instruction on, not just on FOIs, but on how we do things at the school. And we take them up to the plane, and that's when we start to find out that, who you thought was a great candidate on paper can do a simple commercial maneuver because they're used to doing it one way. I was like, okay, you can do it, but teach me it, and they're like lost. So
Yeah,
it's really, really good to kind of bridge that gap. And I know you can fly. You have a certificate that says you can fly, but can you teach it? And we've noticed that even double I's, they come in and they can't brief an approach properly to another student. So they only get certified for like private and commercial maneuvers, and then they got to do some more flying to get to the level where they can teach somebody double I.
and this guy could speak to that better than anyone, CFI boot camp in Miami, right?
Yeah.
And so what does he do? He just makes CFIs. It's a specialty. That's what we do, special materials. And Mike Shiflett is like a media monster making lesson plans and more, tools for pilots. But they still got to be able to talk. And the big challenge when somebody becomes a CFI is that split brain experiment. You all know this. You're doing it naturally now, but it was a real challenge to be able to talk it, fly it, analyze, and the joke, and it's true, as a CFI, you can see entering on the 45 to the downwind if somebody's going to be successful on the landing, right? It's there. But it's not built into this guy. They really don't get it until they have a little bit of background. And if you make this person into a passionate learner, I always say I'm trying to sell them on general aviation so they won't go to the airlines. I had to convince them it's much more fun to fly seaplanes, gliders, all these great things that we have in general aviation. But if they do go to the airlines, maybe they'll become a Brian Schiff or a Mike Jesh. Mike flies a 787 to China, right? 14 hours. And while it's on autopilot, what's he doing? He's probably developing his 4:30 online presentation for the FAST team. He's still a passionate general aviation pilot. So if we want to preserve aviation and move it forward, we have to really sell it to these people who are going to be in the industry. The other thing is when they're done, when they retire, they've got to come back and help us. I was hoping Michael Hare, he's one of our board members, was here. F-16 pilot. Air Guard, ran a squadron, airline pilot, 20 years, retired, and now he's at Gainesville. And what does he do? He's teaching primary flight instruction. 16,000 hours, he comes back, and he's moving the whole thing forward. He's giving back to aviation. We really need those people to come back into the industry and mentor these people. They're not ready to be on their own yet. And when I got my initial CFI, there was a guy named Stick who was the guy that owned that Champ that I have now. You probably remember John Stickle. Anyway, he, if the student hasn't learned, the instructor hasn't taught. And I can't tell you how many times he taught. I said, this guy can't, it's not his fault, it's your fault. Okay? Anyway, the thing that happens as soon as you have Pollux did. Back on there it goes. Her and her. As soon as a CFI has their CFI and they're, a new CFI and they're making money, what do? They start a YouTube channel, right? Mm-hmm. I'm a high-time flight instructor. I have 200 hours. Okay? And I'm not poking fun at anyone. I just pulled this off the internet, but you do see this, 200, 300 hours. I've been a CFI 2 years. I'm qualified to sign off more flight instructors, right? There's a lot of atrocious stuff. We all know this. Masquerading as professionalism. So you really have to caution your students, obviously. If you don't do this, you're crazy. I had a student who's like, can we fly the 152s in formation as student pilots? I'm like, no, I don't think so, not today. Or they see the big wheel Kit Fox stuff going on. Can we land? No, let's not do that, But they all want to. They got into it because of that excitement. Has anyone seen how many hits those flying cowboys get on a new video? Like, I crashed my Piper Cub. 2.3 million. And you go, well, wait a minute. There's only 600,000 pilots in the country. How can you have two? Well, everybody thinks that's how pilots fly now. That's our reputation as pilots. We're out there landing on highways and fueling at the local self-serve. So YouTube's a big negative influence for general aviation, in my opinion.
I think there's some good stuff about that.
There are some good things, but you have to curate it.
Right.
And that's what the business, of SAFE is really, is pointing people at, these are good, But boy, I'll tell you, some of the stuff, and Chris Palmer is actually very good.
A local DPE calls it YouTube roulette. You never know what you're going to get. I compare it to the Asian buffet, where all the food looks great, and that one will kill you. This is really good, but you don't know. Anyway, I'm a big fan of this program, and it's because I guess I started with it back in the 90s, a master instructor. The FAA has absolutely nothing for CFIs in the way of recurrent training, moving you forward. There's absolutely nothing that, has stair steps. Sandy and Joanne Hill created this, and every 2 years you have to recertify yourself as a master instructor. You need continuing education units. This is how I got all my extra ratings. Okay, I'll get a seaplane. Okay, I'll do the glider thing, and CFI, commercial. In other words, it keeps you learning as a passionate learner. You have to model this for your students. What's the difference between, who's the high-time CFIs in here? You and that guy, that nebbish that Roger kicks across the stage. What's the difference? You both have a CFI, airplane. So, show the world that you're a little bit better. Plus, challenge yourself. And I think the big thing is challenge yourself. Tom Turner called me up and he said, I don't really need that. I don't want that. I don't need the recognition. I said, it's not about recognition. It's about keeping yourself active as a CFI and learning something new every couple years. Doug just did his. He's, what are you, 12? 12. He's caught me again. I got to get another one now. Pilots are a little competitive. You think? Anyway, the Aviation Performance Solutions out there that does the jet upset training, every one of their instructors has to be a master instructor aerobatic to keep their job. That's required. And it's not hard. All of you guys in this room could do a master instructor. Every one of you, I guarantee. If you're busy every day as an instructor, the key thing is the pain of validating it. So print this out off the website. Every time you do something, just write it down. And you have to, it's like doing your taxes the first time. You'll learn how to save all the paperwork and the validations. Otherwise, you're writing a lot of emails when it comes around to, did you see me? I was just out, like I said, up in the cold country doing my 6158 in citation. And I'm like, can you guys sign me up for wings? What's wings? We're general aviation. It's a little small world, but you start saving these, you'd be surprised how quickly you get to master. And that's why they came and got me and said, you're going to be a DPE. I didn't go to them. I was in the flight school. I remember the day clearly, working on the sim. 3 guys from the FSDO walk in. When 3 guys from the FSDO walk into a flight school, it ain't a great day. And I'm working away. It's like, oh, this is bad. But they said, you're going to be an examiner. I said, no, wait a minute. Only old guys become examiners. And now I resemble that remark. So, anyway, this is Sandy and Joanne Hill. And that's Marion Blakey, who was the first administrator I remember, FAA administrator that couldn't fly, right? We called her the Penguin. Anyway, you can look there. The point should be made, though, that just because you're a master instructor doesn't mean you're great, right? This is from AOPA. Thank you, Jamie Beckett. This is, this goes on more times than we would admit, right? Especially male-female thing, right? You like that one? Is that you telling the stories? Anyway, the focus obviously is on my experience, this. Is she getting full value for her lessons? No, I don't think so. And that's why you should be a CFI again, so that women can be trained by women and we don't have that dynamic. Anyway, I'd highly recommend this book. If you get to the show notes, and I can email them to you all, that would, I do have a QR in here. Yeah, this book is free online, and it should be the FOI. It's like this thick, and it talks just about teaching. Teaching by itself is a separate skill, right? It's not peculiar to just aviation, but we're in such a silo that we got this little stupid book, The Fundamentals of Instruction, which gives you almost nothing, just so you can pass the test, and it really doesn't tell you how to teach. This book is wonderful. I remember explaining to Doug what metacognition was, and he said, yeah, good stuff. That's thinking about thinking. That's what pilots do all the time. We don't know that, but when we're flying, there's our little angel on the shoulder that's saying, are you screwing this up, David? Yeah, usually. Okay, risk management. Let's get out of there. So SAFE started this program, and this was an effort. It's called CFI Pro. And this was the famous blender that you put a new CFI into one end, and out the other end comes David McVinney or Doug Stewart, somebody that really knows how to teach. We were trying to take
the new academy graduate and make them into a wonderful flight instructor. But what happened, and this was Redbird about 5 years ago, and that was at the AOPA You Could Fly Center. But what happened was we got a room full of DPs, the most experienced people in the planet, because we had to charge money to defray the cost. So we had a great time, but it was really experienced pilots talking to experienced pilots. And some of the most senior instructors. And there's Bob. Bob Hepp has always been my role model. I mean, I just follow what he does because he knows how to run a flight school. But, you know, Timmerman there, he's a CFI of the year, and Adrian Eichhorn. I mean, these are the top shelf people. So what we did was we traveled the program now. And we will show up at your school or your university or whatever and do a program. This is at, and you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
I think you're there.
My man, right there.
Anyway, what a wonderful crowd and very receptive. In other words, mentoring is not painful. Once you convince them that they need to know something, mentoring is very satisfying. This is the best crowd going, really. So this is the question I always ask at this point, and there's a little quiz. And does everyone have a phone? Can you shoot a QR code? Can you see it?
My service is terrible.
Even that free Wi-Fi thing sucks?
Oh, I didn't get on Wi-Fi, good point.
Yeah. Everyone should go to forms. Did that come up?
I come up, okay.
Yeah, it's a little Google form. A couple questions. This will inspire you to think about your initial flight training, maybe. If not, I mean, you don't have to. A few people will do it and get it, and you know, just think back to when you started your experience in aviation, and then we'll talk about if we can make a good CFI. Is that working for everyone? Yes, Jamie.
One of the reasons I think this is so important, an example of, because I do a safety presentation on non-towered airport ops.
Yeah.
And you probably read it, written about it. One of the problems is so many CFIs get their tickets at towered airports. And they have relatively little experience, and they think of them as uncontrolled airports. And they teach their students, you can enter the pattern any way you want because this is uncontrolled, which is not true. It's actually regulatory. 91.126, it's very specific. But because of that, this problem where, well, that's what my CFI told me, so that's the way we do it. So I'm doing straight in while you're doing a right base, and somebody else is going a left base to a different runway. I mean, this can be a real safety hazard. So kudos to you for doing this presentation, because getting our CFIs to do this well, take pride in their work, and be accurate in what they tell people, literally saves lives down the road.
And I don't know if you saw the JetBlue out in Colorado. Had to go around and had a tail strike because there was a King Air coming in the opposite direction at a non-towered field. Which uncontrolled might be the right word. Right?
We also call it pilot control.
Pilot control. But you know, what we find as examiners is somebody learned, wherever they learn, they're good at, right? Tower control, you go to a non-towered field, hopeless. Every flight evaluation I do, I guarantee you, if we're starting at a non-towered, we're going to go to a Delta or a Charlie. And if we start at a Delta or Charlie, we're going to go to a non-towered field. Frequently, they have a little crosswind, and I NOTAM one runway out of service, so we might have a crosswind too. Yes! evil flight instructor. Yes?
On that note, too, before COVID, well, when COVID was happening, remember, all of the tower areas, they closed up operations. So we got regional jets and corporates coming in, and it's like, okay, how are they going to get into the pattern? Because we're not having tower operations.
Right.
That was very
Southwest, and Denny Weiss is in the back, Southwest captain. We talked on that day when Midway went north. What do they call that? ATC-0. How's the Southwest people doing, Danny? It's like, well, geez, I don't think they know what they're doing. Midway's like a hashtag, and suddenly, you know, non-towered, and, you know, here's guys in 737s. I left downwind land. I'm taxiing. You know, they keep calling for clearance to taxi. Ain't no one going to give you clearance to taxi. Just move your big blue jet out there and go. So, yeah, it's a skill. And Mike Jesh wrote me on, we're on the Safe Faculty Lounge, is the Safe Facebook internal.
and saying how when he was a FO, they're going into Eagle before it was tower control. And, you know, the guy at the controls, captain, very senior captain, but he had no idea how to operate at a non-towered airport because his whole military career had been tower control. So,
You see that a lot.
yeah. I instructed a very senior Air Force guy who had never flown an ILS, all PARs. He had an instrument rating, never flew an ILS. Left, right, up, down, they drive you to the runway. Couldn't believe it. And he's qualified. Let me see if I can get this quick to go to that website and see what's showing. Everyone about done with that? See what we've got here. 29 responses. I'm going to do the Josh thing on you now. Let's see if I can. You good at this, Nick?
He's good at it.
You're good at this. Come up here. Help, Nick! Help! It's not going, buddy. Co-pilot.
You're not gonna get it.
So what do you need with these guys?
There you go.
Oh, baby. Hand for Nick. Whenever I do one of these, I always scan for the IT people. Help, help. Okay, let's see. Quality of my flight training. Actually, you guys are right in the middle there, right? Okay. Oh my God, this is not proving my point. You all had great flight instructors, right? First flight instructor was wonderful. Was your
Remember,
first?
everybody loves their flight instructor. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
That's what we find out.
That's an excellent point.
Just like you said in there, you mark down your
That's
school,
exactly what happens. I
but you
didn't know.
mark up your instructor. You don't know how bad your instructor is.
Yeah.
Until you get a better one.
Yeah,
In my case,
How bad
Yep.
that first instructor was.
yeah. And then they do, yeah.
in my case, the two questions are actually on two different flight
Yeah.
instructors. So the first one, you know, they didn't know what they knew because it was like the picture of the guide, you know, her first flight instructing job. And then, but the next few questions was actually based on the person that actually got me through and signed me off. So it's actually two different people in my case. So that's, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the reason the survey doesn't do good for flights, because we've got flight training organizations like the flight instructors. The students think the flight instructor is God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they always highly regard the instructor.
And that's the point she made, and what a good point that is.
What does the flight instructor do? Not much, but they don't realize.
I gotta do one thing here before I forget, and I always forget this. I gotta have a picture for my board of directors so they know that you were actually here. You'll be in the, see, all of you guys will be in the next PowerPoint, right? I gotta wave my finger and move my lips. Take another one.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, so the point here, five. Oh, boy, you're wasting film. Talk about dating yourself. Anyway, patient, military. You think a military instructor is good? Okay, let's bring them back for our part 61. Patient, time, fun, available, supportive, active throughout the entire process. Not looking at their cell phone, right? Not messaging while you're flying. Good. You know what's amazing though, and Nick, help Nick, back to Samsung. Escape. Just thinking. Oh, I know what we have to do. We have to do that, that, and no, escape. I gotta have my notes or I'm hopeless. Oh well, we're winging it. Show notes are gone.
Yeah. He needs to be able to see his name.
Oh, you run a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
You good at this, buddy?
Just yeah, PowerPoint.
There's very little. I'll just be as surprised as you are what the next slide is. That's all. Anyway, if you didn't know, the NTSB has recommended that all CFIs now meet a certain standard. And there's a wizard up in Fargo, South Dakota. Are we time? Yeah, get close. Who's keeping track of all CFIs. They know what every CFI is doing. This is, again, the Canadian system. In other words, they track whatever you're doing. Would this be a great CFI for you? This was my nemesis when I ran a flight school. This, you know, every student pilot was coming in with a 50 mission jacket on, right?
That's how I learned to roll the tomahawk.
There you go. There you go. But the point is, this is an excellent pilot, probably. But, you know, there's a very different skill set for being a CFI. And we were talking about this before the show. And you guys are onto it. You said, you know, compassion and all. But how do you learn that stuff, you know? And again, if you were a parent or a teacher, but, you know, you're not going to learn it as the young person coming out of the academy. If you haven't seen this, this is the pilot personality. And that QR will take you there. But we're talking reality-based, self-sufficient, suspicious, intelligent, not intellectual, analytical, goal-oriented, competitive, hunger for excitement. You know the pilot personality, right? And suddenly you're in the cockpit with somebody who's flying the plane left, right, up, down, sideways, you know. I remember my first couple hours, I thought I was going to get sick. It's like, oh, great, this is the CFI job now, right? It really is different. And you have to endure that. They're learning to fly. It's kind of like flying with your elbows. You're using your words through that obfuscation sort of machine, and their hands are on the controls, and you have to create a performance. So you have to be very compassionate, and you have to, this is what they usually come up with. I think this was at Wayman. I think that's your handwriting. But these are the skills you're looking for. And I asked Jill what she looks for when she interviews new flight instructors, and she said, they're people you would like to hang out with. They're people that have... So anyway, quick. This is what the gentleman back, this is what I call the Mccurdy Method, because Mike McCurdy was the first one I heard using it. He starts everyone in the simulator. They do the maneuvers, and they get good at it, and then they go to the plane. So you learn it, sim it, fly it. More effective. He says his school makes more money and the students pay less. And I think that's what the gentleman in back was saying. This system works. And I can tell you, I told Charlie this. I said, I confess, Charlie, I'm an old, 7AC Taylorcraft kind of guy, fly the plane. After I've been corporate and I've been in level D simulators, I'm all about simulators. I think they're a wonderful tool, and I think they're a great place to initially be exposed to.
In our instrument course, the first 8 lessons is actually in the simulator.
Yeah, and most people do instrument in the sim, but they don't do, and Redbird never really sold this. It was Mike that first did this. Repetition. We emphasize scenarios a lot, but repetition in the early training pre-solo is kind of, and I make the analogy, if anyone suffered through piano lessons, right? You know what Hanon is? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, I mean, you're learning muscle memory, and that is sort of key to learning flying, too. This kind of stuff in the Air Force has become really popular, really effective. And this is the book that sort of proves that. Talent Code. If you don't have this book, I'd highly recommend you get it. Daniel Coyle. This was a New York Times bestseller. And the point here is, he went around and he said, why are these people so good at what they do? And it's all about training just out of the comfort zone, what he calls the struggle zone. Not so far out that you're flailing. You have to be challenged, but you don't want to be, flailing. And so that's called the talent code. And neurologically, what that does is it myelinates that pathway so that you can repeat it. We all kind of know that as flight instructors. It gets better with time automatically if we repeat it correctly. Perfect practice, right? And this is the last point here is incremental mastery. This is part of what we're talking about with teaching in the simulator. It's a step at a time, like this. You don't really want to get somebody in there. If you're going to climb this wall, it looks impossible, but if you do it a step at a time, it all moves forward and you get done. what I do, and this surprises a lot of people, have to see what it says. It ain't there, too. Solo people in 5 hours. What do I mean by that? It's not that they're landing, but they're doing everything. In other words, you can't believe how empowering it is to take a new student and you say, okay, today's all yours. You pre-flight, you do the weather, we're going to the practice area, I touch nothing. They solo all the way to the practice area all by themselves. I'll help you with the landing when we get back, but you do all of that. Last point is never scare your students, because if you do that, that's the dropout. And I really am convinced our school always put ground reference maneuvers before stalls. Gives people a little more time in the plane to get comfortable. And, upstate New York, you almost have to do that. And you probably know what this curve is, but that's the struggle zone. Optimal performance, push them a little further, not to the point where they're in distress, but that's where you have to train. And it's different for every person. So that's a. I see the hook coming out here. And that's the heart of it. It's a customer-centered experience. You got to teach to the individual person. And there's the app again. And David goes, bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.